Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, joined today by Jamey Eisenberg, and we have a one quarterback startup mock draft for you. And Jamey, this one's going to be interesting because we've got half analysts, half fans from Twitter. We're going to see a draft, a startup mock that hopefully looks a little bit more like what people see at home.
It's always fun when you, throw a little unknown, and by unknown I mean just we're used to drafting with a lot of the same people in our mock drafts, and Dynasty redraft, everything that we typically do, because we like to give similar voices to what we encourage people to do. But it's always fun to have some of our audience participate, and I always like to see how some of that changes the perception of maybe what we think, because I didn't realize that guy's should be maybe drafted a little bit higher, or I can't believe that guy fell so far. It's always fun to get those kind of selections.
So I started the draft off with Jamar Chase. Michael took Justin Jefferson, and immediately somebody had troubles in the draft room. I would guess we'll get through the first round, and that is, he says that Joey Wright, Jamey, would like to draft Justin Jefferson one pick after someone drafted Justin Jefferson. Should I give Joey a hard time? No, I would never want to do that. Hopefully somebody else in the draft room can help him. Again, this is a one quarterback, full PPR league with two running backs, two wide receivers, a tight end, and two flexes. And Joey is now just going to type the names of the players that he wants in the chat, and I will draft for him. Amon-Ra St. Brown goes number 3 overall. And I'll be interested, Jamey, when I look at my rankings at the top of a one QB league, we basically have 7 wide receivers ranked before any running back. So Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Malik Neighbors, Puka Nacua, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brian Thomas Jr. I think the first 2, Chase and Jefferson, will be pretty clearly separated. And then those next 5 wide receivers could be just about anybody. Jamey is on the clock now with about 20 seconds left, so I'll keep talking about these wide receivers.
No, I didn't know if you wanted me to talk through my pick, so I'll just make the pick and then you can.
Yeah, you're taking Puka Nacua at number 4 overall.
Yeah.
I've had people question me, like, are you worried at all about Matthew Stafford? Does that give you any pause with Puka?
For this upcoming season or for the foreseeable future?
For the foreseeable future.
So I think if he's committed to, he's probably going to be a year-to-year guy for the rest of his career.
Right.
I'd be very surprised if he leaves the Rams, knowing that this team is young. It was competitive this year. He's got arguably a top 3 coach. Wherever you want to put Sean McVay, he's in the upper echelon of coaches. So the system has been great for him. He's got clearly one of the best receivers in football. We'll see what they do with Cooper Kupp, but they've been able to find guys basically out of nowhere. And so, as long as Stafford is still there, I think Nacua has a chance to be special. I would anticipate Stafford playing another 2 or 3 more years.
Yeah, and I think, like, if you look at those top 7 wide receivers, we've got plenty of reason to have question about Justin Jefferson's quarterback over the extended term. I don't know how much longer Dak Prescott's going to be playing at elite level. We still haven't really seen Trevor Lawrence play yet at the level of Matthew Stafford when he's at his best. And I think what we did see this year was Puka show pretty clearly that he is the number 1 wide receiver. Looks like Matt Donnelly having a little bit of troubles here this morning as well. So he's going to take Malik Neighbors. We're going to go ahead and just make that pick for him. Speaking of guys who we have reason to question their quarterback situation, although Neighbors may have just shown us this year that doesn't really matter. So when we get to the running backs, which are coming up very quickly, Jamey, do you have a strong preference between Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs?
I would lean toward Bijan simply because the short term should somewhat favor him, because Gibbs still sharing with David Montgomery. I would not be surprised if when we get to 2026, if Montgomery might not be on the Lions and Gibbs is the featured guy, and we know what that could be. So if you're looking at it maybe from a 2-year perspective, because Gibbs should still be really good and maybe close to Bijan. But Bijan, I think, showed that in this offense, he could be a 20-point-per-game guy, if not more. The way that he closed the season was fantastic. And I do expect that this Falcons offense will be a little bit better with Michael Penix over the course of the season than what we saw with Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I think that will be really interesting. The sample size we got of Penix, I feel more confident that he's going to be better than what Cousins was last year. I think the question is, can he be as good as what Cousins was in Minnesota? And is Kirk Cousins just completely washed, or is he going to be able to support wide receivers at some point in the future? Joel Cox did take Bijan Robinson at pick number 7. Jerry takes Jahmyr Gibbs right after him, and then Brian Thomas Jr. goes. And I think this is the point, Jamey, when those first 7 wide receivers go off and the top 2 running backs in Bijan and Gibbs go off, where you kind of look at the rankings and you've got Achane, you've got Nico, I think this is a time when you can consider Brock Bowers. It really opens up after those first 9 guys.
Yeah, and Brian Thomas was right after the 2 running backs. I think he's in that conversation with the receivers that went ahead of the running backs as well, just given what he showed. But there is some question marks. But look, yeah, I mean, Brian Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, they're so special and still very young, clearly, entering year 3 for both those guys. So the upside is through the roof. It's going to be really exciting to see how they perform. But yeah, then this is where you start to get some questions, so especially in a 1 quarterback league, super flex, you probably be taking quarterbacks at this point.
Right.
But in terms of, where we look at from the receiver standpoint, I think Brian Thomas makes a lot of sense.
So Adam Azer is not in the draft room on time. He is playing the role of Dan, who is not in today's mock. And so if Azer doesn't show up in the next 45 seconds, Jamey, we're going to pick for him. If you're looking at Achane, you're looking at Nico, and you're looking at Brock Bowers, who's your favorite of those 3?
Well, he's a big Nico Collins guy, so I think giving him Nico Collins makes a lot of sense. I don't think he'd be upset about that if we drafted for him. For me, I would probably lean Nico as well. Just looking at it, I like to build dynasty startups around receivers. I think that makes a lot of sense, just given the longevity of what these guys. It was awesome last year with Tua, but there's so many questions because he was awful without Tua. Bowers, I think, is in this range for sure. But if you say that I could get Nico Collins and maybe Trey McBride on the way back, I would try and play that out more so than maybe reaching for Bowers here, if you consider it a reach, and then trying to get a receiver of Nico Collins' stature in round 2.
So I did take Nico. Adam sent me some profanities in a text message and said, I can't believe I forgot. He will be here shortly. Marvin Harrison Jr. goes 11th overall. And he is a guy that I kind of struggle with, Jamey, because and I think in everybody's rankings, he has moved back from where he was, which was a consensus top 5 wide receiver as soon as he showed up. But I think we might get a rebound with him, kind of like we did with Jackson Smith and Jigba as well. Are there any rookie wide receivers besides Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. that you would take over Harrison in a startup?
So anybody from last year's class, McConkey.
You take McConkey over him?
Yeah, I think what he showed last year, especially in an offense that I'm hoping, and I know we've had some conversations about this once they were eliminated last week. You weren't on the shows. Like Dave Richard, our colleague, was pretty, I don't want to say adamant, but I think hope is probably the best word to assign to it, that the second half of the season, when they allowed Justin Herbert to throw the ball a little bit more, and we're talking, going from 27, 28 passes per game to maybe like 32, 33. So it's not a big leap.
Right.
But that opening up the offense a little bit will just be better for everybody involved in the passing game. Now, the question is, do they go out and get somebody? Because I'm of the belief that this is a team that is not just looking at receiver, but also tight end, because I don't think Will Dissly is the answer there. And based on Greg Roman's offense and the history there, clearly, go back to Mark Andrews and what he had in Baltimore. I would not be surprised if they try and get aggressive with the playmaking tight end. So it could be that, but I do think they're going to add somebody there. So if you're still talking about 32, 33 pass attempts, the target share may not be as good as what it could be for Marvin Harrison. That said, McConkey was just so special. I like him slightly ahead of Harrison going into next year, and for the future.
I want to give our audience a little bit of credit here. I always get a little bit nervous when you're drafting with guys and you're doing a live show and you've never drafted with them before and you want to make sure everything goes okay. We had a few delays in round 1. They were all analysts, people whose names you would recognize. The people who we selected from Twitter did a fantastic job with their round 1 picks. We are done with round 1. Let's take a look at the results, Jamey. You can tell me what stands out to you. So Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown are the first 3 picks, followed by Puka Nacua, Malik Neighbors, and CeeDee Lamb. Then Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Brian Thomas Jr., Nico Collins, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Brock Bowers round out round 1. That's Chase, Jefferson, St. Brown, Nacua, Neighbors, Lamb, Bijan, Gibbs, Thomas, Nico, Harrison Jr., and Brock Bowers. Any big surprises there for you?
I think just really Harrison. If he's going to develop into the player that we hope he can become, which is still well within reach. And I've said this a few times on our other stream on Fantasy Football Today. His rookie numbers were almost identical to his father's. It's a pretty good spot to be in. We just saw two great rookie performances from Neighbors and Thomas. I think that kind of changed the perception a little bit, but he's got a little bit of a way to go, and hopefully we'll get there. Otherwise, I think this is pretty normal. Two running backs and the rest receivers and one tight end.
So the first pick of round 2 is Saquon Barkley. And I said way too many dumb things in 2024 about Saquon Barkley. One of my resolutions is to say fewer dumb things about him this year. But he is going to be 28 years old, and he's a running back. He also has been maybe the best player in football this year. How do you view Barkley as a really you can only count on one more year, or do you get a 2-year window there?
So I just wrote this on the site yesterday that on CBSSports.com that the history of running backs coming off a 2,000-yard season, there's only been 8 of them, is not great.
Right.
And the decline, the best season after a 2,000-yard season was only a 500-yard decline. Only. For the most part, 6 of the 8 guys declined by 870 yards or more. For the most part, there's a touchdown decline. And we're talking about a guy in Barkley that only scored 13 rushing touchdowns, 15 total in the regular season. You're taking a hit in 2 spots that aren't sustainable for him to be elite if he loses the rushing yards and the touchdowns, because he wasn't a big factor in the pass game, 33 catches on 40 targets. So it's a big ask for him to continue to do this. And 2 of the 8, significant injuries. Terrell Davis, that basically ended his career after his 2,000-yard season. And Derrick Henry, that was the year he had a foot injury, was 2021. So it's not a great situation to be in coming off this amazing season. So I'm a little concerned. I would not take him in that spot, no.
And Jamey is on the clock. Again, this is a dynasty startup, so you're not going to see Saquon Barkley available in round 2 of any redraft drafts this year. We'll be pretty happy to get him at that spot in redraft, but in dynasty, the running back position, the age of Barkley, all a little bit concerning. We have, again, kind of a little bit of almost a running back run at the start of this round. We have Barkley, and then Achane goes 2 picks later. Breece Hall goes 3 picks later. Joey Wright just found a Buccaneer to draft. He takes Bucky Irving with the 22nd pick of the draft. Jamey, you had to be thrilled that Ladd McConkey fell to you in the late in round 2.
Yeah, I was looking at the 2 receivers the 3 receivers that went, back to back. So I was hoping one of those 3 would land to me. Drake London, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Ladd McConkey. London would have been my preferred choice. McConkey was second, and then JSN third. I'm hopeful that JSN, with the new coordinator, Clint Kubiak, now in Seattle, will still be featured as he was. We've talked about this a little bit on our show on the other Fantasy Football Today stream that DK Metcalf may end up as a cap casualty, a June 1st cut. I'd be surprised by that, but there's still the potential out there. Jason's in a great spot, but I like the setup for McConkey going into year 2 and what he should be able to do.
So we've made it through 2 rounds. It is a 1 QB draft. We've seen no quarterbacks taken yet. And I think we've gotten to the point to where we start looking in round 4 in redraft. Does that change for you at all in Dynasty? Because they do have a longer runway than most of these other positions. You get an elite quarterback, you might have him for a decade. At what point in Dynasty do you start looking for the top quarterbacks?
I think this is the spot. You look at Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. I think Jay and Daniel certainly makes a ton of sense, clearly, with what he did as a rookie. So those 3 are, and Burrow belongs there. I guess Jalen Hurts belongs there. Also, the top 5 guys that I know I have for redraft are pretty similar for Dynasty as well. They're all young. They're all elite talents. Do you put Daniels ahead of the other guys because of his age, or do you still go Allen, Jackson in some order?
Yeah, it's still Allen and Jackson, and then Mahomes and Burrow for me. With Daniels, he was awesome as a rookie. I need to see in year 2, does he take a step forward or does he take a step back? And his awesomeness as a rookie was fantastic for rookie production. But in terms of actual fantasy production, unless you want to break it up and Azer stat it into the second half of the season, it wasn't exactly elite. Let's take our first break, and then we'll break down round 2.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more.
It's Gareth Bale! Ronaldo! Wonderful goal!
On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Round 2 results here, Jamey. Saquon Barkley, Garrett Wilson, Devon Achane. Then A.J. Brown, Trey McBride, Breece Hall. Drake London, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Ladd McConkey, Bucky Irving, T. Higgins, and Kyron Williams. I took Kyron Williams with the 24th pick. I know I'm higher on him than consensus. At some point, are we going to accept that he's just an elite fantasy running back, or do you think the doubts continue going into next year?
I don't think the doubts continue. You know, and this is, I think, an interesting redraft dynasty conversation with a player like him, because how sustainable is it for the future? You know, for a guy that isn't exactly built like a typical workhorse back. And I don't know if they ever viewed him that way. He's sort of fallen into that role and been amazing in that role. It felt as if last year that they were looking for a supplement, not a replacement, but a supplement. And it never came to fruition, whether it was he was just too good, too valuable, or Blake Corum was never that guy for them. But it feels like they've been trying to find someone to help him. And will that eventually turn to someone that replaces him is my concern. So I think for the short term, so like if you're looking, I'm in win now mode, I think Kyron Williams makes a ton of sense in that spot. If you're looking, I want a guy for the next 2-3 years, I don't know if he's a 2026 and beyond type of player.
Yeah, that's with guys like that. I think you could say the same thing about Bucky. With that low cost, high production, that those guys can fall off, but it feels like the entire time that Kyron's been doing this, we've just been waiting for him to fall off. And so I'm still pretty comfortable with him about this range of the draft. I think he's a top 10 dynasty running back for sure. Looking at the start of round 3, I took Jordan Addison, then Jonathan Taylor, Zay Flowers. You took Rashee Rice. I want to talk about Rice versus Worthy for next year and for Dynasty, because Worthy's really in both the playoffs and the second half of the season looking like a lot like what Rashee Rice did last year. You still feel like Rice is going to be the number one in this offense when he's healthy and when he's not suspended?
I'm terrified. But I think just based on, first off, there's so many things at play. We talked about this on Monday's show on Fantasy Football Today. Is Kelsey back? Is Rice suspended? Is Rice hurt? Coming into the season. So all those things, let's just assume everybody's back. Does Rice step back into the go-to role that he had in the first 3 games before he got hurt, where Worthy was yet to establish himself, and obviously Kelsey was, probably still managing snaps? I don't know. Worthy's been so awesome in 4 of the last 5 games. He didn't have the best playoff game against the Texans, but he was still second on the team in targets. So he's been so good those 5 games, excuse me. Does he, just build off that another strong game in the Super Bowl potentially, and then we'll see. And if Kelsey's gone, I think both guys can be amazing, because then we're talking about, okay, I don't think Mahomes ever or Reed ever forced the ball to Travis Kelce. I think it's just a natural, flow of the offense. They get him going. But if he's not there, I don't think, let's just say it's a Noah Gray or another, non-Hall of Fame caliber tight end, then you're looking at 2 first-round caliber receivers who could just be amazing, and they both can eat. So it wouldn't shock me if Kelsey decides, okay, 3-peat, I'm done, and these 2 guys go off and become top 20 caliber receivers, kind of like how we view in whatever your description of them is, the Eagles guys, the Dolphins guys, 2 guys that could be just pretty successful in a high scoring offense.
Well, and I think one of the best things is that it's not hard to see how Rice and Worthy can complement each other, especially if the Chiefs can get back to the best version of their offense. And you have Xavier Worthy playing a downfield Tyreek Hill role, and you have Rashee Rice playing that underneath Travis Kelce role, then you could see 50% of the targets going to those 2 guys if there's no Travis Kelce, or during the portion of the season that Travis Kelce feels like he doesn't really need to give, I wouldn't say not give 100%, but they just don't have to use him all the way for the, 2 or 3 months. Yep. Let's take a look at round 3, which just wrapped up. I started with Jordan Addison, then Jonathan Taylor and Zay Flowers, Rashee Rice, Jameson Williams, Rome Odunze, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, then James Cook, and here come the quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, the last 2 picks of round 3. So Addison, Taylor, Flowers, Rice, Williams, Odunze, Smith, Waddle, Hill, Cook, Jackson, and Josh Allen. When you look at that trio of even really four, but Rome Odunze, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, I think there's a ton of potential in those guys, but there's reasons to doubt all of them going into next year. Smith, when everybody's been healthy, hasn't quite been the guy. Tyreek took a big step back last year as a guy who's over 30. Waddle wasn't the same guy, and we haven't seen Rome Odunze do that. Who do you feel is the safest of this group in Dynasty?
I do think it's Waddle, mostly because you may have number one receiver for the Dolphins this year, almost certainly number one receiver for the Dolphins in 2026. And so you may take a hit this season if Hill comes back and they kind of run the offense the same way, where he's almost the 2-3 as opposed to firmly entrenched as the 2. And as we saw 2 years ago, where he was the 1B, and it was a disappointment. But if they decide to move on from Tyreek Hill, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about Jalen Waddle, where I took McConkey, if not where London and JSN went. I mean, that's the upside that he has. So to me, he's safe to an extent, and upside may be the best of the round.
Adam Azer would now like to have a pick back. Unhappy with his DJ Moore selection at the start of round 4.
He just made it, and then he also
made the like. He didn't even get auto picked. He made the pick, and now he's swapped it to Chris Olave. And I don't even know which one of those guys I have ranked higher. Did Azer make a good choice there? Is Chris Olave over DJ Moore?
I would rather have DJ Moore at this point. I mean, Keenan Allen's certainly no guarantee to come back, and if he does, it's not a long-term situation there. You have coordinator that you love now as the head coach, guy calling plays, and Ben Johnson. Caleb Williams on the rise. Like, I would prefer DJ Moore with the uncertainty in New Orleans over the.
I do have Olave one spot higher, but 2 picks later, Terry McLaurin is taken, and I have him 3 spots higher. And the next pick is Xavier Worthy, and I have him 10 spots higher. So it's a wide receiver run. I'm not necessarily don't necessarily love the order those guys went in. You mentioned Jaden Daniels. Joel Cox takes him with pick 42. It doesn't seem like, Jamey, there's really any concern from anybody about Jaden Daniels doing anything other than building on this and being better next year. But we didn't really have any concern at this point last year about CJ Stroud taking a step back, right?
No, I think the difference is that one guy can still make plays with his legs, and that saves his fantasy production, So we had this conversation, I think it was on Fantasy Football Express, me and Adam Azer, exactly the thing that you brought up. So there could certainly be some regression for Jaden Daniels as a passer. But then I think when you talk about him as a fantasy option, his legs should save him. I mean, 800 yards rushing as a rookie quarterback is pretty impressive. And there was that stretch where he had the rib injury where he didn't run as much. So we could be talking about a 900 to 1,000-yard rusher, especially if things really start to go south for him as a passer. Then maybe he relies on that a little bit more. So I don't know if he's going to get to what Lamar did as a 4,900 guy, like you saw this season, but 3,500 and 8, I think that's well within range of the outcomes for him.
We see Sam Laporta. I was just kind of thinking about, like, when does the next tight end come off the board? And the end of round 4 seems like a pretty good place for Sam Laporta. Trying to update my list here. It's funny, Azer sent DJ Moore back into the pool, and 10 picks later, nobody's taken DJ Moore. That might be my selection here if Michael lets him fall to me at the end of round 4. Somebody just said, are there 2 James Cooks? Well, I don't think there are, but there might be. I wonder if somebody got a draft sent back. And Joey Wright in the chat, Joey Wright drafting Buccaneers and Lions, a tale as old as time.
Yeah.
I actually invited Joey to come on the show with us today, Jamey, because there's a lot of fantasy analysts who don't want to talk to me after the last couple of weeks and what the Chiefs did to the Bills. But, Joey's team's Tampa Bay, the last team to beat Kansas City in a Super Bowl. And so Joey still likes to talk to me because he's got that to hold over my head. DJ Moore taken by Michael with pick 47. It feels like we get to this range and you might start thinking, like, Is there a quarterback or a tight end that I feel okay about? I'm going to go ahead and take Mahomes here to lock that down. And then I'm going to take Chris Godwin. We don't really think that he's much of an injury risk for next year, right? Like the ankle injury did cause him to go on IR, but it's not a situation like the ACL where we might have a down year in response to the missed time. Are you expecting a fully healthy Chris Godwin next year?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it's not the worst case scenario of injuries, and so the upside is amazing. The only concern would be is does he lose some value if he goes to a different team? And so what does he look like if he's not the slot receiver for Tampa Bay? Granted, it's a new coordinator. Things could change dramatically anyway, but there's still so much to like about what he did healthy this past season that he has the chance to still be one of the best players at his position. So over 19 PPR points per game was pretty impressive. You're gonna have to give me a second because I was expecting to take a quarterback here and they all went.
We did have a quarterback run. I will run through round 4 here while Jamey is making his pick. So DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and Chris Olave start the round. Then Terry McLaurin, Xavier Worthy, and Jaden Daniels, Brandon Ayuk, Chase Brown, and Josh Jacobs, Sam Laporta, DJ Moore, and I took Patrick Mahomes. So that was Metcalf, Pickens, Olave, McLaurin, Worthy, Daniels, Ayuk, Brown, Jacobs, Laporta, Moore, and Patrick Mahomes. And the quarterback run that Jamey was talking about is just kind of what happened right after I took Patrick Mahomes, because I took Mahomes, and then 2 picks later, it's Burrow. And then right after that, it's Jalen Hurts. And Jamey is left without an elite quarterback to take. And so you take George Kittle. Does a pick like that, Jamey, a 31-year-old tight end in round 5, change the direction of the rest of your draft? Is this now a win now team?
No, I think it's balanced, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's got another 2-3 years of just doing this, especially with, Brock Purdy most likely getting locked up and the receiving core sort of being in flux a little bit. Most likely within the next 3 years, you might not have half a season of Brandon Ayuk this year. Deebo Samuel clearly has fallen off. He may be gone soon, maybe gone this year. Ricky Pearsall, does he ascend to a go-to guy? And Juwan Jennings, is he a go-to guy? So I think George Kittle is still going to be one of the best, most productive tight ends. And I have enough of talent to go that route if I want to go win now, especially with, young receivers that are going to be productive at the start of my draft, and a running back that I think has another 2 years maybe of being one of the better players at his position. So we'll see what the next couple of rounds bring. So Kittle may be the determining factor of how I approach this, but I think I could be competitive this year and still be able to, build a roster that should be competitive for a few years.
Joel takes TJ Hawkinson not long after you took Kittle, and that's somebody I was considering at the 4-5 turn and very interested to see where he went. If I didn't take him going into next year, he will be 28 years old, so 3 years younger than Kittle. Obviously 3 years older than somebody like Trey McBride, and feels like Hawkinson, Jamey, is a pretty safe bet to be slightly better than replacement. Like we see these guys Dallas Goedert seems to end up right around 9 or 10 fantasy points per game. I'm expecting better than that from Hawkinson, but I'm not sure we're getting a true difference maker either.
It's going to be hard to say because who's the quarterback there?
Right.
Kirk Cousins, when he was there before Hawkinson got hurt, was able to support all 3 guys. Jefferson was obviously great. And it was kind of disjointed if you go back to the final season, but I'm looking more beginning of the year before Jefferson's hamstring injury, and even going back to 2022 and Kevin O'Connell's first season there. Addison had his moments. It would have been interesting for you to do that because you took Addison. So to put yourself all in on the Vikings is JJ McCarthy good? Is he the answer? Is Sam Darnold coming back? There's a lot of questions with the Vikings offense, to the point where you want to be in bed with 2 of the 3 and one of them not being Jefferson.
Right. I think like the main question is probably, is JJ McCarthy good? Or does it even matter, because was Sam Darnold good? Azer just took Jerry Jeudy with the 58th pick of this draft.
I considered him.
Yeah. It's another guy who is his quarterback, and he's given us these flashes, had a couple of flashes in Denver, a huge flash for a third of the season last year where he looks like a number 1 wide receiver. And then there's been times where he's barely a replacement level player. Two guys went right before Judy, though, were Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry. And I asked you the question, Jamey, with George Kittle. But if you're taking McCaffrey or Henry this early, you're definitely looking win now, right?
I think you have to, and it's an interesting build for team 9. I don't see the name, Joseph, maybe.
Yeah.
To go with Tyreek Hill and then Derrick Henry, you have to be win now.
Right.
If you commit to those two players in the first, 6 picks, it just makes sense. So you have, obviously young stud and Brian Thomas Jr. You have, still very players in their prime that are going to be productive in AJ Brown and Terry McLaurin. But you have two guys that if they hit this year, you're going to be in great shape. If they fall off, as we saw with Tyreek Hill, for example, then you're going to be in trouble. So this has got to be, you have to commit to win now.
So Jonathan Brooks goes at the end of round 5, and one of my top remaining players is actually Chuba Hubbard.
Same.
And I just don't like, I loved Jonathan Brooks' talent coming into the NFL so much, but I don't know that we're going to see him at all next year. And then who is he now that he's had these major injuries? It just feels like you almost have to view Brooks as a mystery box that you're just sitting on IR for the next year, and you hope that he can be. Is it as bad as how the J.K. Dobbins situation felt at this time last year? Probably not quite, because he's not quite as. I mean, he's 3 or 4 years younger than than he is, but it's still a very risky proposition to have Brooks on your roster. Jamey, we saw the old running backs go before the old wide receivers. Are you getting close to the point to where you're considering a Devontae Adams, a Mike Evans, somebody in that group?
I think you should. And honestly, again, that should be what Joseph is targeting. Somebody that has a chance, not so much Adams, I think, but Evans, who could still be productive for at least one more season. And where he is with the quarterback that he has, as opposed to we don't know where Devontae Adams is going to play. So yeah, Evans is great value at this point, and then it becomes a question of some of these other older players, not to, put out players are still available in the draft, but Alvin Kamara is still out there. If you're looking at, a guy who was, productive last year, Joe Mixon, and what he showed, there are still some players that for 1 year, if you're committed to it, they can really help you and help you in a big way.
I think I'm going to have to make a pick for Jacob. I praised the listeners just a little bit too soon. So he has on his team Josh Allen, Saquon Barkley, DK Metcalf, and Brock Bowers. You mentioned Joe Mixon. I think this would be a good team to put Joe Mixon on at running back. And then my top wide receiver in the Dynasty rankings is actually, he says he picked Shakir and Chuba. He did not, but we're going to get that done for him, Jamey. Khalil Shakir, how likely do you think it is that we see the Bills add a number 1 wide receiver?
I think it's very likely. You look at what this team was lacking, and look, give them credit. They tried midseason. They thought Amari Cooper was going to be somebody that could come in and help them. 30-year-old guy looked like he was totally washed up, which was disappointing. So I'm a guy that I would consider in this round is Keon Coleman. So if he makes it back there, he'll certainly be somebody I'm interested in. And I think if you're talking about this format, redraft, I would take Shakir over Coleman. Dynasty, I'd be taking Coleman over Shakir, because if Coleman hits, he could be special. If Shakir hits, I think we see what he is. Top 30 receiver at best. I don't think he's ever going to be a top 20 guy. Keon Coleman has that potential if things go right.
We talked about Isaiah Pacheco, who was just drafted by Azer at pick 63. And I think that our general consensus is we think that he's going to bounce back and be himself. But if the team brings back Kareem Hunt on a almost nothing deal, does it even matter if Pacheco's all the way back? It's going to be some sort of timeshare, right?
I think it's just what you're looking at short-term versus long-term. I still think that if Pacheco is right, he's their best running back. Kareem Hunt did a great job for them. One of the certainly best free agent signings preseason and midseason, for what he brought to this team, and, gave them some presence of a running game. Certainly was great in finding the end zone. Can he do that if Pacheco is Pacheco? That's such a weird pick for Joseph to take McMillan there. I love it.
It's not, you don't say it's a weird pick because of the timing of it.
No, I love
pick.
I love the round. He was somebody I considered the previous round. I just thought it was a little too soon. Thought maybe he'd make it back to me, but just the build. If Godwin comes back to Tampa Bay, this is a horrible pick for him for the way his structure is.
Right. Yeah, it's and this is the thing. Like, there are people that go through startups and they want to be good now and later. I always talk about how, like, I'm going to commit to winning it now, right now, or I'm building for the future. Some people, I think what Scott White used to say in fantasy baseball is waves, not windows. It just was always going to have a good team. And listen, if you can make that work, I think it's more difficult if you're playing in a league with 11 guys who are all really paying attention. Let's take a look at the round 5 results. I took Chris Godwin, then Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, George Kittle, Ken Walker, Jaden Reed, TJ Hawkinson, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Jerry Jeudy, Jonathan Brooks, and Khalil Shakir to finish off the round. That Ken Walker pick, I had a couple people in the chat saying they were sniped. I have absolutely no idea how to rank Walker and Zach Charbonnet, Jamey. And it sure feels like the best case scenario is if one of these guys could end up on a different team. But we're at least one more year away from that.
I think so. I would still lean toward Walker just based on, what he showed when he was healthy in terms of usage. And again, we don't know what Kubiak, the new offensive coordinator there, is going to do. But I would hope that there's, maybe closer to a 50-50 split to give these guys an opportunity to maybe stand out each individually, because we haven't really seen that from Charbonnet when Walker's been healthy. But look, Walker, the ceiling is higher. It feels like the ceiling's higher for Walker. It's just, can they throw him the ball a little bit more? Can Charbonnet get a little bit more work on obvious rushing downs? That's the question for each guy.
You took Ricky Pearsall with pick 69. I know when I drafted for someone earlier this offseason, one of the things they said was, please make sure you get me Ricky Pearsall. Is this a bet like Jalen McMillan on one of the 49ers being gone next year? Or is it a bet on Brandon Ayuk just not being healthy? Do you think there's a path for Pearsall to succeed if they don't trade anybody?
I do, and we saw it in the second to last game. I think it was week 17, week 16, one of those two games. He was featured and he stood out. I mean, look, the guy went through obviously a nightmare start to his career, getting shot, slow in training camp, and then playing behind, a pretty established receiving core when you factor in Jawan Jennings as well. There is a move coming. If it's not this season, it's next season, where most likely Deebo Samuel is the one that's gone because they extended Brandon Ayuk. So does he get the opportunity to do that in year 2, or are we waiting for year 3? So short term, yes, there's a path to him to have success if he gets off to a good start with the idea of Ayuk not being ready. There also is a chance that they can move on from Deebo, and he's great now. There also could be a situation where he's got to be worked into the rotation, and we don't see the best of him for several months, and maybe not to 2026. So it's a gamble, but I think just given the way that I have this, build to my team, it's a gamble I'm willing to take because I have 3 receivers. I'll hopefully figure out second flex if I need to for this season. I'll backfill running back if I need to. And the way that I played it, just because of the quarterbacks, I'm going to take Caleb Williams here. So hopefully, he's a guy that can be a successful QB1, but also with a chance to be, special long-term, just knowing what they did with their coaching staff.
That was risky. You said you were taking Caleb Williams there with Joey getting ready to make a selection. Hopefully he doesn't. I think
he's got a quarterback.
He took a quarterback right before you. He's been having some troubles with seeing who was available in the draft room. And now as I read back through the chat, looks like I might have drafted somebody that Joey was wanting to draft. I'm sorry that I took Joe Mixon from you, Joey. But now that you've picked Caleb Williams, Jamey, I mentioned him a round ago, and he's still available. Devontae Adams, 32 years old, showed up in the middle of the season in New York and basically pushed Garrett Wilson into wide receiver 2 status. We don't know for sure what team he's going to play on. We don't know for sure who his quarterback's going to be. But did Devontae Adams show you enough last year to where in most situations you're going to view him as a must-start wide receiver this year?
No, I'm not going to view him as a must-start wide receiver because of the uncertainty. Yes, he's got the potential to still be a must-start wide receiver. Obviously, he defied my biggest concern, which is generally age.
Right.
Can he do that without Aaron Rodgers? Because he wasn't great without Rodgers to start the season, when it was the crappy quarterbacks in Las Vegas. He wasn't great with Jimmy Garoppolo the year before, when there was the crappy quarterback situation there. So I don't think he's just he's foolproof. I think there's still definitely a lot of questions. It's just a matter of, can he overcome them? I would be surprised if I'm sorry, it wouldn't surprise me if he's back with the Jets and they run it back again, because there's not a lot of answers out there to solve the Jets' immediate problem. You know, is there a quarterback that just walks in and is the starter? Well, no, they're not in the best draft spot either. And if you're going to bring back Rodgers, why would you not bring back Davante Adams and try and make this at least somewhat of a competitive offense while Aaron Glenn retools the defense and gets them into a situation where they might back themselves into the playoffs and maybe accomplish some of the things that they were hoping to accomplish when last year started.
I think you're right. It's just for a new head coach who's trying to assert himself as the leader of a team, to deal with the situation that is Aaron Rodgers and everything he brings with it. It seems like a really hard way to have success. Like, how do you get those guys to believe that you're in charge and that Aaron Rodgers is not in charge? But yeah, if it's Rodgers and Adams back on the Jets, then I think you're probably ranking Davante Adams the top 20 wide receiver. And he's a steal in Dynasty, where Adam just took him at pick 82. Good job, Adam Azer. Maybe the first good pick of the draft. I shouldn't say that. Let's take a look at Adam's team, Jamey, and you can tell me how many good picks he's made. So he does not have a quarterback yet, but it's one quarterback. He doesn't care. His running backs are Devon Achane and James Cook, with Isaiah Pacheco on the bench. At wide receiver, he has Nico Collins, Chris Olave, Jerry Jeudy, and Davante Adams. No quarterback or tight end yet.
I think it's a team that can compete right away. That goes without saying. Nico Collins is one of the best in football. The running backs are proved themselves last year to be two of the best, and Pacheco, when healthy, could be there. And as we just discussed with Davante Adams, there's a chance for him to be a good number 2. Now, the question is, what is he looking at beyond this season? Because we know the lifespan on running backs, and Pacheco's lifespan may have expired already based on, the broken leg. And as you alluded to, if Kareem Hunt comes back next year, does he ever get back to being the featured guy, or the Chiefs eventually replace him, if in fact it's a shared situation? Judy's got no quarterback that we like right now. Olave's got no quarterback that we like right now. And Adams may be out of the league as early as 2026. So he better start looking at it as this is a win now team, as opposed to a team that you're going to build for the future.
Let's run. I hope he's listening. Hope he can make that change on the fly. Let's run through round 6 results, as we've almost finished up round 7 here. Jacob started us off with Chuba Hubbard, then Mike Evans, Isaiah Pacheco, Jalen McMillan, Keon Coleman, David Montgomery, Tyrone Tracy, Michael Pittman, Ricky Pearsall, Tony Pollard, Alvin Kamara, and Joe Mixon. If you're choosing between Kamara and Joe Mixon, which one is your preference right now, Jamey?
I would lean Mixon just because he's slightly younger. And at least I like his offensive environment more right now than I do for Kamara. But, look, PPR, it's hard to, continue to bet against Kamara because he's just got so much upside, as we saw, over 19 PPR points per game.
We saw Michael Pittman go in that round also, and I think that was I took Josh Downs at the next turn. I think a lot of people are going to have a lot of apprehension about the Colts pass catchers just not knowing what the situation is with Anthony Richardson. Do you feel better about it if they bring a Flacco or someone like that to be the backup so they have an escape route, or you just those guys are boom bust flex options?
I think they're boom bust flex options, but obviously, as we saw, when there was a more capable quarterback in there from a passing standpoint, they look much better. So, I like the fact that Anthony Richardson is working with a quarterback coach that hopefully can fix his mechanics. I like the fact that the team is going to be committed to him. That's important. They're bringing back the same offensive coaching staff. I think that's important too. And let's see what they do with the full year of him starting. Hopefully, he stays healthy, and those receivers can make some plays. So, yeah, I'm still encouraged.
We have reached the Darnell Mooney, Ramondre Stevenson portion.
2 guys I just queued up, as a matter of fact.
2 guys you just queued up. Yeah, I wasn't saying that because they reached for them. I was just saying because we do get to a point, especially this time of year, when there aren't any rookies in there. So we kind of lost some of the older guys, but we don't have the rookies to replace them yet. Things to look a little thin right around that 7-8 turn. Let's take our second break, and they'll recap round 7.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more.
It's Gareth Bale. Ronaldo. Wonderful goal.
On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
I started round 7 off with Josh Downs. Then we saw Cortland Sutton, Brian Robinson Jr., and Caleb Williams, Dalton Kincaid, James Conner, Deebo Samuel, Romeo Dobbs, Mark Andrews, Devontae Adams. That's Downs, Sutton, Robinson, Williams, Kincaid, Conner, Deebo, Dobbs, Andrews, Adams, Etienne, and Mooney. At Etienne before Tank Bigsby. Do you have a strong lean there, or should those guys just go very close to each other?
I'm hoping that, Liam Cohen can bring out the best of Travis Etienne. Look, Tank Bigsby did some nice things last year. He doesn't have the upside that Etienne has, as we know, as a pass catcher. So should they go close to each other? Yeah, relatively close. Is there more upside for Etienne? For me, yes. That's the answer.
Well, I think like people see Liam Cohen going there, and we know what the running back position could be. I think we probably get a committee, and hopefully Etienne is the guy who's doing all the pass catching work. So in this, we will get a holy cow. Jamey Eisenberg is screwing up the draft again. I think we had Travis Kelce auto pick, and so I wonder what you are feeling right now about the likelihood that we are going to get a Travis Kelce season in 2026, or do you think this is the end?
I think if they win, he comes back. I think if they lose, depending on how he feels, they're done. He's done.
If they win, he comes back. If they lose, he might.
I don't think he wants to be a part of I don't think he wants to give up the opportunity to continue to be a part of history.
Right.
So I think if they lose, like, okay, our run ended, it's not done, because Reed and Mahomes are still there. But if we win, man, I can't walk away from 4. Going for 4.
So we have seen both Dalton Kincaid and David Njoku go before Travis Kelce, who hasn't been drafted yet. Or if you had a promise that Travis Kelce was playing next year, would you take either one of those guys over Kelce?
I would take Njoku over Kelce. I would not take Kincaid over Kelce. I was as big a Kincaid guy as you could find last year. Thought he was going to have a huge season with what the receiving core looked like for Buffalo and the some promise that he showed as a rookie. And look, the injury may have, somewhat stifled what was starting to get going a little bit. But what a disappointment that was. Forget about the drop in the playoffs. That was a tough call, a tough play.
Right.
It was just, pretty upsetting to see the way that he performed last season and the lack of usage. I mean, they gave so many snaps to Dawson Knox though.
We just had Rich Cooling, who I haven't said his name yet. Thanks for being here, Rich. Take Tank Dell in the middle of round 8. Is Tank Dell like Jonathan Brooks, just kind of a draft him and stash him for the year? We hope they're good in 2026.
I hope so. It's another guy that feels like we could be looking at a disappointing career, just based on the injuries that he's sustained. This is a tough one to come back from, and I'm hopeful. I have a lot of expectations for him because he's looked so good. But man, that was a tough injury. So hopefully he can get himself back right and looking like the running back that we started to see.
I would be more likely to not entirely give up on him, but maybe kind of write him off because of the injuries if it wasn't for the fact that, like, you still can't watch a Texans game without hearing about what great friends CJ Stroud and Tank Dell are.
Right.
So I think like that's just kind of the way that the world works. Those types of relationships get you a little bit more opportunities. And so I still am pretty optimistic and hopeful that once he is 100% healthy, he's going to get another chance. I'm less optimistic that he's going to be able to stay healthy once it gets to that point.
Yep.
Zach Charbonnet was just taken, and I want to make sure that I did. Sometimes I miss things, and I missed the Tank Bigsby was still available. So I'll take Quentin Johnston and Tank Bigsby at the round 8, round 9 turn. Let's recap round 8. We'll take a look at Jamey's team, take a look at my team so far. We will finish this draft, even though we're not going to finish it on the podcast. We will finish it, and I will publish results either later today or early tomorrow. Always love it when Joey says, "Dang you, Heath," in the chat. Even got an exclamation point. It's a January mock, and we're getting fired up. I absolutely love it. Round 8, Ramondre Stevenson, Rico Dowdle, David Njoku, Justin Herbert, Cooper Kupp, Calvin Ridley, Tank Dell, CJ Stroud, DeAndre Swift, Rashad Bateman, Zach Charbonnet, Quentin Johnston. I think Swift is the guy, Jamey, who is either you took him. He's either being drafted way too low or it's going to be a very sad 2025 for him because the same thing that happened last time he was with Ben Johnson's going to happen. You're still pretty optimistic about Swift and Johnson together, right?
I'm not very optimistic. I mean, when we're talking about nearly pick 100 here of running backs that are available, I'm looking for upside. And I do think that there's still upside for him,
right?
Going into the offense that he's going to play in, so there's a couple different versions of the Lions backfield. He was part of that under Ben Johnson when, I think is what you're kind of talking about, right, in that he wasn't great with Ben Johnson, but he still averaged, I think, well north of 4 yards per carry, did have a lot of explosive plays. He just lost touchdowns to Jamal Williams. And that's kind of been his, problem is that he loses touchdowns to other players. So could that be Roschon Johnson? Sure. Could he be the Jahmyr Gibbs, 70% of that, 60% of that? That'd be pretty good in this spot. So he's tied to them for at least one more season, maybe 2. And if he has the opportunity to play at a high level, then I think this is a great pick. But like you said, it's a little bit of more desperation than necessarily a slam dunk. Okay, I feel comfortable that I just took DeAndre Swift as my second running back.
So let's take a look at my team here. You hurt Matt's feelings, if nothing else. He didn't like that Dobbins pick. So good job there in round 9. I've got Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. My running backs are Kyron Williams, Joe Mixon, and Tank Bigsby. At wide receiver, I have Jamar Chase, Jordan Addison, Chris Godwin, Josh Downs, and Quentin Johnston. There is still no tight end on my roster. I'll have to take Kelsey if he makes it another round there. But when you look at those wide receivers, I think I'm probably a little bit higher. I know I am on Addison and maybe on Downs. Is this receiving core good enough, Jamey? Chase, Addison, Godwin, Downs, and Johnston.
A lot of questions. Mostly with Godwin, Downs, and Quentin Johnston, because again, right, Godwin, different team. Is he still elite? Downs, we know the up and down, performances with the quarterback, and Johnston may get replaced. They may bring in another receiver there. If that happens, kind of what we talked about with Lab McConkey. Like, I don't think McConkey gets hurt as much as Johnston does, especially if they're going to bring in somebody, they're going to bring in an outside receiver, to help Justin Herbert there. So I think the route that you've taken is more win now as opposed to build for the future, because Godwin 29, Mahomes obviously can, play for 10 more years, but Williams may not have a long, lifespan. Obviously Mixon doesn't have a long career lifespan. And, if the Chargers draft a guy, it's a draft and develop situation, then hopefully Quentin Johnston can still be good for, one more season. It feels like you're more win now than opposed to as compared to planning for the future.
It is a team that Travis Kelce would fit on. And I think you're going to be more win now if you like your running backs more than you do your wide receivers generally.
Yep.
As a rule. So we are finishing up round 9 in the draft room. We're going to go 14 rounds. When we get those done, I'm going to publish these results over to the website. I opened up the email this morning and I saw a couple of emails of people sending screenshots of their 5-star reviews on Spotify and their questions. It's a good reminder that this Friday, we will be doing a one-man mailbag. I will be answering as many of your questions as I can on air. May actually, if we have enough questions, also write up a mailbag so some of you will get the written responses. I appreciate everybody's really support of the show. Everybody who was here in the chat. Thank you to everybody who participated in the draft. Thank you for being here, Jamey. Thank you, Schaefer, for running the draft board. We will talk to you guys on Friday.